You either give your room to my wife or forget I'm your son. Ethan's words didn't drift across the dinner table. They exploded like a grenade in the middle of the pot roast I'd spent 3 hours preparing. He didn't suggest it. He didn't ask politely or take me aside for a private conversation. He yelled it, like a judge reading a sentence, like my bedroom was public property up for auction, like I didn't have the right to sleep in peace in a house I'd built with my own hands. Lydia sat beside him with that tiny, victorious smile she wore whenever she knew the game was already won. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, a prop she'd been using like a shield for months. The silence that crashed down after Ethan's ultimatum was suffocating. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's get to the story. No one defended me. No one gasped or said, "Wait, that's going too far." They all just sat there. And I, Kate Hunter, 70 years old, widow, mother who'd given everything, felt something crack open inside my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. I'd already survived that when Richard died. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. For the first time in months, I saw this situation with perfect, crystalline focus. My son wasn't negotiating. He was evicting me from my own sanctuary, the room where Richard had held me through chemo, where we'd painted the walls cornflower blue because it reminded me of my mother's garden. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice or throw my napkin down in dramatic protest. I took a slow breath, set my fork beside my plate with deliberate care, and said in a voice so steady it startled even me, "If that's what you want, Ethan, then you'll have your answer soon." The confusion that rippled across his face was almost satisfying. Lydia's smile faltered. Ethan had expected tears, bargaining, guilt-induced surrender. Instead, I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward my bedroom with my spine straight and my head high. The storm outside matched the one raging inside me. Rain hammered against the windows as I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my hands trembling now that no one could see them. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the same kind of storm that had rolled through the night Richard died 2 years ago. I'd been holding his hand in the hospital while lightning flashed outside his window, and he'd whispered, "Don't ever let anyone make you small in your own home, Katie. Promise me." I'd promised. And then I'd spent the last 2 years breaking that promise piece by piece. It started innocently enough. 3 months after Richard's funeral, Ethan had called saying he and Lydia needed to cut expenses while they saved for a house. Just temporarily, Mom. Maybe 6 months, tops. You have all this extra space. 6 months turned into 8. 8 turned into a year. And somewhere along the way, extra space became wasted space, and temporary guests became permanent residents who acted like landlords. I walked to my dresser and picked up Richard's framed photograph, the one from our 30th anniversary trip to Lake Winslow. He was laughing, his arm around my shoulders, the sunset turning everything golden behind us. That version of me looked so different. Lighter. Freer. Like a woman who still believed she deserved to take up space. "They want the room," I whispered to his photograph. "Let them have the house." I set the frame down gently and opened my laptop, my hands still shaking but my mind suddenly, strangely clear. The listing appeared on my screen like a life raft in dark water. Lakeside cottage for sale, Lake Winslow. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, wraparound porch, garden lot. Move-in ready, $245,000. My friend Martha had sent me the link 2 months ago with a message, "Kate, look at this little dream. Someday when you're ready to live for yourself again." I'd replied with a heart emoji and filed it away as fantasy, the kind of thing you look at when you're daydreaming but never actually pursue. But tonight, with the sound of Ethan's laughter drifting up through the floorboards like mockery, I opened that listing with new eyes. The cottage was small but perfect. Blue shutters. White trim. A porch that wrapped around the front where you could watch the sunrise over the lake. The kind of place Richard and I used to talk about when we'd lie in bed making impossible plans. When we retire, he'd say, "Let's get a little place by the water." Just big enough for us. Maybe a garden for you, a dock for me. We'd never made it. Retirement came with a cancer diagnosis instead of a lakeside cottage, and all those dreams got filed away under someday until someday disappeared entirely. I clicked through the photos. The kitchen had large windows overlooking a wildflower garden. The master bedroom, smaller than mine here, but it didn't matter, had French doors that opened onto the porch. In one photo, I could see the lake shimmering in the background, peaceful and endless. My chest felt tight. Not with sadness, but with something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what to call it. Hope. I opened my banking app, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me was terrified to look. The other part, the part that had been quietly, secretly planning for years, already knew what I'd find. The balance appeared, $287,340.60. I stared at the number, my heart pounding. Almost $300,000. Money I'd accumulated over 40 years of freelance accounting work. Money I'd saved in the gaps between paying Ethan's college tuition and covering his first car and funding his wedding and floating him and Lydia through every temporary financial crisis. I'd always thought of it as emergency money. As family money. As anything but what it actually was. Mine. I took a screenshot of the cottage listing, then opened my email and typed quickly before I could second-guess myself. Dear Helen, Realtor. I'm interested in the Lake Winslow cottage listing. Is it still available? I can provide a deposit immediately and would like to schedule a viewing as soon as possible. Best regards. Kate Hunter. I hit send before I could think about it too hard. Downstairs, I could hear them celebrating. Glasses clinked. Lydia's high-pitched laugh echoed up the stairs. Someone, probably Ethan, turned on music. They thought they'd won. I sat on the edge of my bed, Richard's photograph in my hands, and let myself think about what came next. The logistics. The timeline. The confrontation that was inevitable once they realized what I'd done. But mostly, I thought about that cottage. About waking up to sunlight on the lake. About having a garden that belonged only to me, where I could plant whatever I wanted without Lydia complaining that the flowers weren't modern enough or Ethan suggesting I let the yard go natural to save money. About having a home where no one shouted ultimatums across the dinner table. My phone buzzed. An email notification. Hi Kate. Yes, the cottage is still available. I'm so excited to hear from you. Can you come see it this Saturday at 10 a.m.? I think you're going to love it. Helen. Saturday. 3 days away. I typed back, perfect. I'll be there. A knock on my door made me jump. Mom? Ethan's voice, softer now. Guilty. Come in, I said, closing my laptop. He opened the door slowly, like he was approaching a wounded animal. His face was flushed, from wine or shame, I couldn't tell. Hey. I wanted to talk about earlier. I waited. I didn't mean to yell, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. It's just. Lydia's doctor said she really shouldn't be climbing stairs this late in the pregnancy. And your room is right here on the ground floor, and it has the bathroom attached, and what about my back? I asked quietly. He blinked. What? My back, Ethan. The herniated discs. The reason I've been seeing Dr. Patterson twice a month. The reason your father built this room on the ground floor in the first place after my surgery. A flash of something, guilt, maybe, or annoyance at being reminded, crossed his face. That was years ago, Mom. You're fine now. I almost laughed. Almost told him about the mornings I could barely get out of bed, about the stabbing pain that shot down my leg when I climbed more than a few stairs, about the prescription muscle relaxers in my bathroom cabinet. Instead, I said, you told me to choose. So I'm choosing. Relief flooded his expression. Oh, thank God. I knew you'd understand. Lydia's been so stressed about I'm choosing me, Ethan. The relief vanished. What? I said you'll have your answer soon. And you will. I stood, walked to my closet, and pulled out my old leather suitcase, the one Richard and I used to take on our anniversary trips. Mom, what are you doing? Packing, I said simply. Like you asked. I didn't mean. He stopped, ran his hand through his hair the way he used to when he was a teenager caught in a lie. Look, you don't have to be dramatic about this. We're family. We can work something out. I turned to face him, suitcase in hand. You're right. We can work something out. And I will. Soon. What does that mean? It means good night, Ethan. He stood there for a moment, confusion and frustration battling across his face. Then he left, closing the door a little harder than necessary. I locked it behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain continued to pound against the windows, and every creak of the house settling felt like a countdown. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering. I remembered building this house with Richard, how we'd argued playfully about paint colors and where to put the kitchen island. How he'd surprised me by adding a window seat in the bedroom because I'd mentioned loving them as a child. I remembered bringing Ethan home from the hospital, how we'd set up his nursery in what was now the guest room upstairs. How Richard had painted clouds on the ceiling and installed a night light that projected stars. I remembered Richard's last night in this house before the hospital, how he'd made me promise not to let anyone diminish me, how he'd held my hand and said, "You're stronger than you think, Katie." Don't forget that. I'd forgotten. Somewhere between grief and loneliness and desperately wanting to keep my son close, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up for myself. But I was remembering now. I picked up my phone and opened my photo gallery, scrolling until I found the screenshot of the cottage. I studied every detail, the blue shutters, the porch railing, the glimpse of lake in the background. Then I opened a new note and began making a list. Call Martha, attorney. Update will. Contact realtor. Start packing, quietly. Remember who I was before I became small. I read the last line 3 times, then whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry I forgot, Richard. But I'm going to remember now. I promise." The storm was finally starting to ease. Through the window, I could see the first hint of dawn turning the sky from black to deep purple. A new day was coming. And so was my freedom. Morning arrived with deceptive cheerfulness. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, turning everything golden and warm, as if last night's storm, both weather and emotional, had never happened at all. Lydia stood at the counter in her silk robe, humming something tuneless while she buttered toast. She looked up when I entered, her smile bright and unbothered. "Oh, Kate. Good morning." She spoke like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "I hope you slept well. Don't take last night so seriously, okay? Ethan just gets a little intense sometimes. Pregnancy hormones have us both on edge." She laughed lightly, touching her belly. "You understand." I stood frozen in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, staring at this woman who just watched her husband scream at his mother and was now acting like it had been a minor disagreement about dinner plans. "Right," I managed. "Hormones." "Exactly." She took a bite of toast, completely oblivious, or perfectly calculated, I couldn't tell which. "Anyway, I was thinking we could start moving some of your things this weekend. Just to make the transition easier." Nothing rushed. Nothing rushed. As if she hadn't been rushing this for months, making comments about how dark my room was, how outdated the furniture looked, how much better the space would be with the right vision. I poured my coffee in silence, my hand surprisingly steady. Ethan appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work. His eyes slid past mine, landing somewhere near the refrigerator. "Morning," he mumbled, grabbing his travel mug. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd said less than 12 hours ago. Just guilt flickering across his face like a candle he was trying to snuff out before anyone noticed. "Have a good day at work, honey," Lydia called as he headed for the door. He paused, glanced at me briefly, a look that might have been regret or might have been annoyance that I was still here, still a problem unsolved, then left without another word. The front door closed with a soft click that somehow felt louder than his shouting had been. I spent the morning in my room, sorting through drawers with methodical calm. Every few minutes, I'd hear Lydia moving around the house, opening cabinets, running water, humming that irritating tuneless melody. Around noon, I went to the kitchen for water and heard her voice drifting from the living room. She was on the phone, her tone animated and excited. "No, I'm telling you, it's perfect. The room has this huge window that gets morning light, ideal for a nursery. We can put the crib right there, and there's even space for a changing table and a rocking chair." I stood in the hallway, glass in hand, listening. Ethan's mom is finally being reasonable about it. Honestly, I don't know why she was being so difficult in the first place. It's not like she needs all that space just for herself. Something cold settled in my chest, not anger exactly, but something harder. Clearer. Yeah, she's moving upstairs. I know, but it's for the best. The baby needs to be on the ground floor, and Kate will be fine. She's just being dramatic about her back thing. Her back thing. 20 years of chronic pain, 2 surgeries, countless physical therapy sessions, reduced to a back thing that was probably exaggerated for attention. I set my glass down on the hall table before I could drop it and walked back to my room on legs that felt disconnected from my body. That afternoon, I sat on the edge of my bed and let myself remember. Ethan at 7 years old, crashed into the driveway on his bicycle, his knee torn open and bleeding. I'd carried him inside, he was so small then, all gangly limbs and trust, and cleaned the wound while he cried. "It's okay, baby," I'd whispered. "Mom's got you. I'll always have you." Ethan at 16, heartbroken over Jessica Martinez who dumped him before homecoming. He'd cried in my arms for an hour, and I'd stroked his hair and told him he was wonderful, that any girl would be lucky to have him, that heartbreak didn't last forever. Ethan at 23, standing beside me at his father's funeral in a suit that was too big for him. His face had been white, stunned. After the service, after everyone left, he'd found me in the kitchen staring at Richard's empty chair. "I'm going to take care of you, Mom," he'd said, his voice cracking. "Dad made me promise. You won't be alone. I've got you." I'd believed him. God help me, I'd believed him completely. Now that memory felt like a photograph left too long in the sun, faded, distorted, barely recognizable. When had "I've got you" turned into "you're in my way"? When had the boy who'd promised to take care of me become the man who shouted ultimatums across my own dinner table? Evening came too slowly and too quickly at once. I made dinner, chicken and rice, simple, something I could cook on autopilot, and we ate in near silence. Lydia chattered about baby names. Ethan scrolled through his phone. I moved food around my plate and counted the minutes until I could retreat. After washing the dishes, I locked my bedroom door and sat in the window seat Richard had built for me 30 years ago. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into twilight, porch lights clicking on, families visible through lit windows, living their normal, uncomplicated lives. I picked up Richard's photograph from the nightstand. "They want the room," I whispered to his smiling face. "They want the whole house, really. And I think I'm going to let them have it." Saying it out loud made it feel real. Terrifying and real. My laptop sat on the bed where I'd left it that morning. I'd been avoiding it all day, afraid that if I looked at that cottage listing again in daylight, I'd realize it was crazy. That 70-year-old widows didn't just pick up and leave. That mothers didn't abandon their sons, even when their sons had already abandoned them. But now, in the quiet of my room with Richard's face looking up at me, I opened the laptop. The email from Helen the realtor was still there. "Can you come see it this Saturday at 10 a.m.? Saturday. 2 days away. I clicked on the listing again, studying each photo like I was memorizing a map to somewhere I'd never been. The blue shutters. The wraparound porch. The garden that would need work but had good bones. The glimpse of Lake Winslow in the background, the same lake where Richard had taught Ethan to fish when he was 8, where we'd rented that cabin every August, where Richard had proposed to me on a dock at sunset 43 years ago. The cottage was small. Much smaller than this house. But looking at those photos, I didn't feel claustrophobic. I felt light. Like I could breathe fully for the first time in 2 years. Could I really do this? Could I really leave the house Richard and I built together, the house where I'd raised my son, the house that held every memory of my marriage? I closed the laptop. Then sat there in the darkness, Richard's photograph in my lap, listening to Lydia and Ethan talking and laughing in the living room below. Mom's room has the big window. It'll be perfect for the crib. The words echoed in my head, each repetition cutting a little deeper. Not we'll find a solution. Not we'll figure something out together. Just the casual assumption that my room, my space, my comfort, none of it mattered as much as their plans. I opened the laptop again. This time, I didn't close it. I pulled up my banking app and looked at the balance again, $287,340.67. Enough for the cottage and at least 5 years of comfortable living, even if I never did another hour of freelance work. I opened a new email to Helen. Saturday at 10 a.m. works perfectly. I'll bring my checkbook. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The moment where I either chose myself or chose to keep shrinking, keep accommodating, keep pretending that love meant erasing my own needs until I disappeared entirely. I thought about Richard's last words, "Don't ever let anyone make you small in your own home." I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who'd run her own accounting business, who'd negotiated with contractors and stood her ground, who'd known her own worth. I thought about the cottage by the lake, waiting. I hit send. The whoosh of the email leaving felt like a door opening. Or maybe like one closing and another opening simultaneously, the end of one life and the beginning of something else entirely. I saved the cottage listing to a folder on my desktop labeled Lake House. Then I created a new document and titled it Moving Plans. Under that, I typed: Saturday, view cottage. Monday, call Martha Ree, selling house. Start packing, small items first. Keep everything quiet until papers are signed. Asterisk remember, this is not abandonment. This is survival, asterisk. I read the last line 3 times, letting it sink in. Then I whispered into the quiet room, to Richard's photograph, to myself, to the future I was starting to build. It's time. Outside my window, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. The same stars Richard and I used to watch from this very seat, planning futures we thought would last forever. Some of those futures had died with him. But maybe, just maybe, some of them were still possible. Just in a different form. In a different place. In a little blue cottage by the lake where no one would tell me I was taking up too much space. The measuring tape made a sharp snick sound as Lydia pulled it across the hallway. 36 inches, she announced to Ethan, who was typing notes into his phone. Perfect for a double-wide stroller. We'll need to move that console table, obviously. I stood in the kitchen doorway with my morning coffee, watching them redesign my home like it was a renovation show and I was just part of the crew. They'd been at it since breakfast, measuring doorways, discussing paint colors, debating whether the downstairs bathroom needed updating before the baby arrived. Neither of them had asked my opinion. Not once. What about this wall? Lydia tapped the space between the living room and dining room. Could we knock this out? Create more of an open concept? Ethan glanced at it, considering. Maybe. I'd have to check if it's load-bearing. It is, I thought. Richard and I specifically designed it that way. But I didn't say anything. I just took another sip of coffee and watched them plan the demolition of my life. Something had shifted in me over the past few days. I'd stopped correcting them when they got details wrong about the house. Stopped objecting when Lydia moved my things without asking. Stopped expecting the decency that clearly wasn't coming. I'd gone quiet. Compliant. Invisible. And they'd mistaken my silence for surrender. Oh, Kate. Lydia called, noticing me finally. Do you know where the spare keys to the basement are? We want to see if there's storage space down there for all your furniture. All your furniture. As if I were being evicted, not relocated. Hall closet, I said. Top shelf. Thanks. She bounced off, as much as a 6-month pregnant woman could bounce, leaving Ethan and me in awkward proximity. He cleared his throat. So, have you thought about when you want to make the move upstairs? Lydia's doctor says we should have everything settled before her 3rd trimester really kicks in. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Tried to find the boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares, who'd pick me dandelions and call them flowers, who'd sobbed in my arms when his father died. That boy was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed the way I'd remembered him. I'm working on it, I said quietly. Relief washed over his face. Great. That's great, Mom. I knew you'd understand once you thought about it. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that probably felt affectionate to him but landed like condescension, and went to help Lydia with the basement keys. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink and went to my room. Friday morning, I sat at the breakfast table spreading jam on toast when Lydia appeared in her yoga pants and oversized sweater, phone pressed to her ear. No, seriously, it's all working out, she was saying, pouring herself orange juice. We'll move in once Kate's shifted her things upstairs. She's being really cool about it now. She glanced at me, smiled, and continued talking as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away. I know, right? I was worried she'd be difficult, but Ethan handled it. He can be very persuasive when he needs to be. She laughed. Yeah, the whole ground floor will basically be our space. Master bedroom, bathroom, easy access to the kitchen. It's like having our own apartment, honestly. I bit into my toast and chewed mechanically, tasting nothing. Oh, and we're thinking of knocking out the wall between the living and dining rooms. Really open it up, you know? Make it feel modern. Modern. The house Richard and I had poured our savings and our dreams into, the house we designed together, argued over, built board by board, was about to be gutted to fit someone else's aesthetic. Lydia hung up and smiled at me. That was my sister. She's so excited about the baby. How nice, I said. She took a sip of juice, studying me. You seem quiet lately. Everything okay? Everything okay. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Just tired, I said. Well, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Moving can be stressful at your age. At your age. She said it so casually, like age was a disease I'd contracted, like being 70 meant I should be grateful for whatever scraps of dignity they decided to leave me. I stood, rinsed my plate, and went to get my purse. Where are you going? Lydia called. Out, I said. I have an appointment. Martha Greer's office was in a converted Victorian on Maple Street, all dark wood and built-in bookshelves. She'd been Richard's attorney first, then mine, and over 40 years had become something closer to family than most of my actual family. She looked up when her assistant showed me in, her sharp eyes immediately concerned. Kate. She stood, came around her desk, and pulled me into a hug. You sounded strange on the phone. What's going on? I sat in the leather chair across from her desk and said the words I'd been rehearsing all morning. I want to sell the house. Martha blinked. Sat back down slowly. The house. Your house. The one you and Richard built. Yes. Kate. She folded her hands on her desk, attorney mode activating. This is a big decision. Have you really thought this through? I've thought about nothing else for days. What brought this on? Is it Ethan and Lydia? Are they pressuring you? I almost laughed at the understatement. They're not pressuring me, Martha. They've already moved in. Literally and emotionally. They're measuring hallways and planning renovations and talking about my room, like it's already theirs. Martha's jaw tightened. That son of yours needs a reality check. What he needs doesn't matter anymore, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. I'm done trying to make him remember who I am. Who he's supposed to be. So you're going to sell your home? Kate, that house is full of memories. Richard's garden. The magnolia tree you two planted when Ethan was born. Your whole life is in that house. Those things will live in my memory, I said quietly. Not in that house. The house stopped being mine the moment Ethan yelled at me to give up my room or lose my son. Martha went very still. He said that? Word for word. In front of Lydia. Who smiled. Jesus, Kate. So yes. I want to sell. I want out. I want. My voice cracked slightly, and I paused to steady it. I want to reclaim my peace. Martha pulled out a legal pad and clicked her pen. Okay. Let's talk logistics. Market value for your neighborhood is strong right now. You're probably looking at $580,000 to $620,000, depending on condition and how quickly you want to move. The number made my breath catch. I'd known the house had value, but hearing it stated so plainly. That's after agent fees and closing costs, Martha continued. You'll walk away with roughly $550,000, give or take. Combined with your savings, you're looking at close to $840,000 in liquid assets. I'd never thought of myself as someone with that kind of money. I'd been too busy paying Ethan's bills. How long? I asked. To sell? In this market? If we price it right, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Faster if you're willing to negotiate. I'll negotiate, I said. I want this done. Martha studied me, her expression softening. Where will you go? Lake Winslow. There's a cottage I'm looking at tomorrow. Lake Winslow. A small smile touched her lips. Where you and Richard used to go. He always said we'd retire there. And Ethan? You're not going to tell him? Not until the papers are signed and the deal is done. Martha nodded slowly, making notes. Then she looked up. We should also update your will while you're here. I'd been expecting this. Yes. I want most of my estate to go to Emily. Martha raised an eyebrow. Emily. Ethan's daughter from his first marriage. She's the only one who still treats me like a person instead of an inconvenience. And Ethan? I met her eyes. He's already taken everything I gave him. The words hung in the air between us. Martha held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded and began writing. We spent the next hour going through details, listing agents she recommended, timeline for probate, asset distribution, medical directives. By the time we finished, my entire life had been reorganized on paper. I'll have the will updated by Monday, Martha said as I stood to leave. And I'll call the listing agent today. This is going to be a shock for Ethan. Good, I said. He's had me in shock for months. It's his turn. Martha came around the desk and hugged me again. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Richard would be too. That nearly broke me. I blinked back tears and nodded, not trusting my voice. I drove home slowly, taking the long route that passed by the park where Ethan used to play as a child. The swings were still there, occupied now by other people's children, other people's memories. At home, Ethan's car was gone, still at work. Lydia's SUV sat in the driveway like a claim staked on territory. I parked on the street and walked around to the backyard instead of going inside. Richard's garden was overgrown now. I hadn't had the energy to maintain it properly since he died, and Lydia had made it clear she found gardening tedious. But the bones were still there, the raised beds Richard had built, the stone pathway we'd laid together, the magnolia tree we'd planted the day we brought Ethan home from the hospital. I walked to the magnolia and pressed my palm against its trunk. 28 years old. Strong and tall and still blooming every spring. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry I'm leaving you. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. The tree would be fine. The garden would survive, or it wouldn't. The house would stand with or without me. The only question was whether I would survive if I stayed. I walked the perimeter of the garden, touching each plant Richard had chosen, each stone we'd placed together. Saying goodbye to the physical space while holding tight to the memories. When I reached the back porch, I turned and looked at it all one more time. The garden, the magnolia, the house with its blue shutters and white trim, the home we'd built with our own hands and filled with love. "I'm not abandoning you, Richard," I said softly. "I'm honoring what you asked me to do. I'm not letting them make me small. Not anymore." The wind rustled through the magnolia leaves, and for just a moment, I could almost hear his voice. "That's my girl." I went inside, walked straight to my room, and pulled out my suitcase. Tomorrow I'd see the cottage. But today, I'd started saying goodbye. The drive to Lake Winslow took exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. I knew because I watched the clock on my dashboard tick forward with each mile that put distance between me and the house that no longer felt like home. The highway gave way to winding country roads lined with pine trees, their scent drifting through my half-open window. The air tasted different out here, cleaner, lighter, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Lydia, *, "Where are you? Need help moving boxes to attic today." I silenced the phone and kept driving. Helen was waiting on the cottage porch when I pulled up, her silver hair catching the late morning sunlight. She waved enthusiastically, a bright spot of color in her coral blazer against the blue shutters of the house. "Kate. Oh, I'm so glad you made it." She bounded down the porch steps with the energy of someone half her age. "I have to tell you, I've been thinking about you all week. This place has been waiting for the right person, and I just have a feeling." She stopped herself, laughing. "Sorry, I get emotional about houses. Occupational hazard." I liked her immediately. "Don't apologize," I said, climbing out of my car. "I understand completely." The cottage was smaller in person than the photo suggested, but somehow that made it more perfect. Blue shutters framed every window. White trim outlined the wraparound porch. A stone pathway led through an overgrown but promising garden to the front steps. And beyond it all, glittering through the trees like a secret, Lake Winslow. "Shall we?" Helen gestured toward the door, keys jingling in her hand. The moment I stepped inside, something in my chest loosened. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The living room opened directly into a kitchen with white cabinets and butcher block counters. Everything was small but thoughtfully designed, no wasted space, no unnecessary grandeur. Just enough room for a life. The previous owners were an elderly couple, Helen explained as I walked through slowly, taking it all in. They moved to be closer to their daughter in Arizona. Broke their hearts to leave, but sometimes life requires hard choices. Sometimes life requires hard choices. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter, feeling the worn smoothness of wood that had been loved and used and lived with. Through the kitchen window, I could see the back deck and beyond it, the lake sparkling in the distance. A narrow path wound through the trees toward the water. "The deck is new," Helen said, following my gaze. "And there's a small dock down at the water. The fishing is supposed to be excellent." Richard had loved to fish. Some of my happiest memories were of sitting on a dock just like that one, watching him cast his line while the sun set and turned everything golden. "Can I see the bedrooms?" I asked. Of course. The master bedroom was at the back of the house, its windows framing a view of the lake through the pines. It was maybe half the size of my current bedroom, but the French doors opened onto the deck, and I could already imagine morning coffee out there, watching the mist rise off the water. "Small spaces can hold big freedoms," I murmured. "What was that?" Helen asked. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." I turned to her. "The second bedroom?" It was smaller still, perfect for a guest room or office. I pictured Emily staying here on weekends, imagine teaching her to fish from that dock the way Richard had taught Ethan. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub and a window overlooking the garden. The whole cottage smelled of pine and possibility and something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten its name. Peace. We returned to the living room, where Helen pulled out her tablet. I should probably mention, I don't want to pressure you, but I received another inquiry this morning. A young couple from the city looking for a weekend place. Something fierce and immediate flared in my chest. This cottage wasn't going to become someone's occasional getaway. It was going to be my home. My sanctuary. My second chance. I'll take it, I said. Helen blinked. Don't you want to think about it? Maybe bring someone to look at it with you? A family member or... No, I said firmly. I don't need to think about it. And I don't need anyone's permission. I'll take it. A slow smile spread across Helen's face. Well, all right then. Let's talk numbers. We sat at the small kitchen table, my kitchen table, I was already thinking, and went through the paperwork. The asking price was $245,000. I offered $250,000 to ensure no one could outbid me. I can wire the deposit today, I said. And I'd like to close as quickly as possible. Helen's fingers flew across her tablet. With an all-cash offer, we could probably close in 3 weeks. Maybe less if the inspection goes smoothly. Perfect. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app right there at the table. My hands shook slightly as I initiated the wire transfer for the $50,000 deposit, but it was excitement now, not fear. The confirmation appeared on screen, transfer successful. Done, I said, showing Helen. She laughed with delight. Kate Hunter, you are my favorite kind of client. Welcome home. Welcome home. The words echoed in my chest like a bell ringing. I texted Martha from the cottage porch before I left, done. Found my peace. Her response came immediately, proud of you. Come by Monday to sign preliminary docs. This is going to be good, Kate. I stood on what would soon be my porch, looking out at the lake through the trees, and felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. On the drive home, I sang. Quietly at first, then louder, old songs Richard and I used to listen to, songs I'd thought I'd forgotten. My voice cracked on the high notes and I didn't care. The windows were down, the wind was in my hair, and I was singing like a woman who just remembered she was alive. The house felt darker when I returned, like I was seeing it through different eyes now. Lydia was in the living room, surrounded by boxes and paint samples. Oh, there you are. She looked up, slightly annoyed. I texted you hours ago. Where were you? Out, I said pleasantly. What's all this? Paint colors for the nursery. Well, for your room, the nursery, I mean. She gestured at various shades of pale yellow and mint green spread across the coffee table. I was hoping you could help me move some of your furniture to the attic today. The movers are coming next week to bring in the crib and changing table, so we really need to clear space. Of course, I said. I'll start tonight. She looked surprised by my cooperation. Oh. Great. Thanks, Kate. I went to my room and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. Then I pulled out my suitcase from under the bed and began to pack. That night, while Ethan and Lydia watched television downstairs, I moved through my room like a ghost gathering pieces of herself. Richard's fishing hat, worn and faded. Into the suitcase. Our wedding photo, the one where we're both laughing at something the photographer said. Wrapped carefully in a sweater. My grandmother's jewelry box. My important documents. The quilt my mother made. Every item I touched held a memory, but I wasn't abandoning the memories. I was taking them with me to a place where they'd be honored instead of pushed aside to make room for someone else's future. I worked quietly, methodically, hiding the growing emptiness of my drawers behind the furniture that would stay behind. Around 10, my phone rang. Nora, my friend since college, one of the few people who'd checked on me regularly since Richard died. "Hey, stranger," she said when I answered. "I've been worried about you. How are things with Ethan and the pregnant princess?" Despite everything, I smiled. "Actually, I'm leaving them." Silence. "Then, what?" "I'm buying a cottage. At Lake Winslow. I'm selling the house and leaving." "Kate, are you serious?" "Completely." "Oh my God." I could hear her moving around, probably sitting down to process this. "Are you sure about this? I mean, that's your home. Your and Richard's home." I looked around my bedroom, half-packed now, already feeling less like mine. "I'm sure about me, Nora. And that's enough." Another pause. Then her voice came back warm and fierce. "Good. God, Kate, good for you. When can I come see this cottage?" "Soon," I promised. "As soon as I'm settled." We talked for another hour, and when we hung up, I felt lighter. Validated. Like maybe I wasn't crazy after all. I stood at my bedroom window looking out at Richard's garden, illuminated by moonlight. The magnolia tree's shadow stretched across the lawn like a reaching hand. I picked up Richard's photograph from my nightstand. "They wanted my room," I whispered to his smiling face. "So I'm giving them the whole house. But I'm keeping us. I'm keeping the memories and the love and the life we built together. I'm just moving it somewhere safer." The moon glinted off the glass of the frame, making it look almost like Richard was winking at me. I set the photo carefully in the suitcase, nestled among sweaters and memories. Then I pulled out my laptop and created a new checklist. Cottage closing, 3 weeks. House listing, Martha handling. Pack essentials, in progress. New life, loading. I saved the document and looked around my room one more time. Already it felt less like mine and more like a space I was borrowing. A place I was passing through on my way to somewhere better. Outside, I heard Ethan and Lydia's laughter from the living room. They thought they'd won. Thought they'd successfully claimed their territory. They had no idea I was already gone. I just hadn't told them yet. The listing went live on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. I was sitting in my bedroom with my laptop when Martha texted, "It's official. House is on the market. Prepare yourself." I stared at the message, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was no turning back now. In homes across the city, people were scrolling through real estate listings, seeing photos of my living room, my kitchen, the garden Richard had planted. Our home, my home, was officially for sale. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. Then another. Then I got up, made myself a cup of tea, and waited. The confrontation came 3 days later. I was in the living room Friday evening, watching a cooking show with the volume low, when Ethan and Lydia came home from their dinner out. I heard them in the hallway, Lydia's voice bright and animated. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, the crib arrives next Thursday. We should really finalize the room situation before then." They appeared in the living room doorway together, Ethan's hand resting protectively on Lydia's lower back. A united front. "Mom," Ethan began, his tone gentle but firm, the voice he probably used in business meetings. "We need to talk about the bedroom. Lydia's doctor said the baby could come early, and we really can't wait any longer to get the nursery set up." I took a sip of tea, eyes still on the television. "I see. So we were thinking," Lydia jumped in, settling onto the arm of Ethan's chair, "maybe this weekend? We could help you move your things upstairs. Make it easy for you. Make it easy for you." As if displacing me from my own room was a favor they were doing. I set my teacup down with deliberate care and picked up the remote, muting the television. The silence that followed felt heavy with expectation. Then I turned to face them, my voice calm and steady. "Then you should both start packing." Ethan blinked. "What? You said the baby could come early. You'll need time to find a new place. I'd suggest you start looking this weekend." The confusion on their faces might have been funny under different circumstances. Lydia laughed nervously. Kate, I think you misunderstood. We're not going anywhere. We're asking you to. I understood perfectly, I said. And I'm telling you that you need to pack. Both of you. Ethan's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Mom, what are you talking about? The house is sold. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock across their faces. What? Lydia's voice went up an octave. You heard me. The house is sold. Or rather, it's on the market, but my realtor expects offers by the end of next week. The new owners will move in by the end of next month. Ethan stood abruptly. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Lydia shot to her feet, her face flushing red. You sold our house? Without even discussing it with us? The possessive pronoun didn't escape me. Our house. My house, I corrected gently. The house Richard and I built together. The house I've lived in for 38 years. The house that belongs to me and me alone. But we live here. Lydia's voice was shrill now, all pretense of sweetness evaporating. We have a baby coming. You can't just. I can, I said. And I did. Ethan was pacing now, running his hands through his hair the way he used to when he was stressed as a teenager. Mom, this is insane. You can't sell the house out from under us. We have rights. You have rights as temporary guests, I said calmly. Which means you have 30 days notice, which I'm giving you now. More than 30 days, actually. I'm being quite generous. Generous? Lydia's laugh was sharp and bitter. You're throwing us out while I'm pregnant, and you think you're being generous? I'm reclaiming my home. You're the ones who wanted me out of my bedroom, remember? You're the ones who started measuring hallways and planning renovations without asking. You're the ones who made it very clear that my comfort, my health, my presence in this house was negotiable. I stood now, facing them both. My voice remained steady, but underneath I felt something powerful building, not anger exactly, but clarity. Strength. So I negotiated. With myself. And I decided I'd rather have peace than a house full of people who treat me like I'm in the way. This is unbelievable, Ethan said, but his voice cracked. After everything we've done. Everything you've done? I turned to him, really looked at him. What exactly have you done, Ethan? You moved in, temporarily, 2 years ago and never left. You've contributed minimally to expenses while I've continued paying the mortgage, the utilities, the property taxes. You've rearranged my home, made demands on my space, and ultimately gave me an ultimatum about my own bedroom. I was trying to. You were trying to make things convenient for yourself, I finished. And I let you. I enabled it. Because I was lonely and grieving and desperate to keep you close after your father died. But that ends now. Lydia's eyes were bright with tears, whether genuine or calculated, I couldn't tell anymore. How could you do this to your own son? To your grandchild? My grandchild will be fine. Better than fine, actually, because she's going to grow up with a grandmother who loves her enough to show her that self-respect matters. That boundaries matter. That women don't have to shrink themselves to make room for other people's demands. Ethan's voice was quiet now. I'm leaving most of my estate to Emily, I said. Your daughter. The only person in this family who still treats me like a human being instead of an obstacle. The color drained from Ethan's face. You're cutting me out of your will. You cut yourself out when you raised your voice and told me to choose between my room and my son. I chose me. For the first time in 2 years, I chose me. The argument continued for another 20 minutes. Lydia cried, threatened, accused me of being heartless and selfish. Ethan oscillated between anger and attempts at guilt. But I remained calm. Unmoved. Free. Finally, they retreated to their room, my room, currently, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the walls. I sat back down, unmuted the television, and finished watching my cooking show. Around midnight, a soft knock came at my bedroom door. "Mom?" Ethan's voice, small and uncertain. "Can we talk? Please?" I considered pretending to be asleep. But that would only delay the inevitable. "Come in." He entered slowly, looking younger somehow in his pajama pants and old college t-shirt. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, vulnerable, uncertain, seeking comfort. Then he spoke, and the illusion shattered. "Mom, you can't just abandon your family like this." I was sitting on my bed, Richard's old compass in my hands, the one he'd used on our camping trips, the one that had always pointed true north no matter how lost we got. "Abandon," I repeated quietly. "That's an interesting word choice. What else would you call it? You're selling the house, cutting me out of your will, leaving while Lydia's pregnant." "I'd call it survival, Ethan." I looked up at him. "I'd call it self-preservation. I'd call it finally putting myself first after spending 70 years taking care of everyone else. But I'm your son. And you're also a grown man who told me to give up my room or forget I had a son." My voice didn't waver. "You abandoned me when you raised your voice that night. When you chose your wife's convenience over your mother's dignity. When you stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as, what? An inconvenience? A furniture piece to be relocated?" "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it, Ethan?" I stood now, the compass still in my hand. "Explain to me how screaming at your 70-year-old mother to give up her bedroom, the bedroom where her husband died, the bedroom she needs because of her chronic back pain, how is that anything other than cruel?" He had no answer. Or none that would help him. "I loved you enough to enable you," I said softly. "I loved you enough to let you stay when temporary became permanent. I loved you enough to keep quiet when Lydia was rude, when you both treated this house like it was yours to remodel, when you made plans for my room without asking if I agreed." I walked to my suitcase, where I'd been packing the last of my things. Richard's compass went into the side pocket, a symbol of direction, of always finding your way home. "But I love myself enough to leave," I finished. "And if that makes me a bad mother in your eyes, I can live with that. Because I can't live with losing myself anymore." "Where will you even go?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Somewhere I'm wanted. Somewhere I can breathe. Somewhere people don't measure hallways to make sure my existence doesn't take up too much space." "Mom." "Good night, Ethan." He stood there for a long moment, struggling for words that wouldn't come. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding Richard's photograph. "I did it," I whispered. "I finally did it." The next morning, I woke to angry voices downstairs. Through the floor, I could hear Lydia's sharp tones and Ethan's lower, tenser responses. "Talk to a lawyer, can't just throw us out," her mental state. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, and went down for coffee. They stopped talking when I entered the kitchen. Lydia's laptop was open on the table, some legal website visible on the screen. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, pouring coffee. Lydia's eyes were red and puffy. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. "We're consulting an attorney," Lydia announced. "You can't do this. We have rights." "Please do," I said. "Martha Greer, my attorney, is expecting your call. She's prepared a complete timeline of my ownership, your status as month-to-month guests, and the completely legal 30-day notice I've provided. She's also documented every conversation we've had about the house, including the night Ethan gave me his ultimatum." I took a sip of coffee. "She's very thorough. And she's been practicing law for 35 years. But by all means, hire someone. It'll give you something to do while you apartment hunt." "You're really doing this," Ethan said. Not a question. A realization. I really am. And there's nothing I can say. "Nothing," I confirmed. "I'm sorry, Ethan. But you made your choice that night at dinner. Now I'm making mine." 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Martha's office. I opened it at my kitchen table while Ethan and Lydia were out, probably looking at apartments, based on the real estate flyers I'd seen them leaving with. Inside was the preliminary sale agreement. The cottage closing date was confirmed, 3 weeks from today. And underneath it, a letter from a couple, the Thompsons, who'd made an offer on my house. Full asking price, cash sale, willing to close in 4 weeks. I read it twice, my hands shaking. Then I texted Martha, accept the offer. Her response came immediately, done. Congratulations, Kate. You're free. I sat there in the quiet house, the envelope in my hands, and felt something wash over me that I hadn't felt in 2 years. Relief. Pure, complete, overwhelming relief. The decision was irreversible now. The papers would be signed. The dates were set. The future was rushing toward me like a train, and instead of feeling terrified, I felt ready. I walked to Richard's garden one last time and stood under the magnolia tree. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling everything in gold and green. We're moving, I whispered. Not us, exactly. But me. I'm moving to that cottage we always talked about. The one by the lake where you taught Ethan to fish. Where we were going to retire together. A breeze rustled the leaves, Richard's way of answering, I like to think. I'm going to be okay, I said. Better than okay. I'm going to be free. Inside, I heard Ethan and Lydia return, their voices tense and clipped. They'd probably found an apartment. Probably were planning their next argument, their next attempt to change my mind. But my mind was already made up. My future was already blooming, like flowers in spring after a hard winter. I touched the magnolia tree one last time, then turned and walked toward the house. Not to battle. Not to argue. Just to wait. Because in 3 weeks, I'd be gone. And they'd finally understand that some decisions, once made, can never be undone. Moving day arrived with cruel, beautiful sunshine. I stood in my nearly empty bedroom watching the movers carry out the last of my furniture, the dresser Richard had refinished for our 10th anniversary, the reading chair where I'd nursed Ethan as a baby, the nightstand that had held glasses of water and books and dreams for 38 years. The room echoed now, stripped of everything that had made it mine. Just bare walls the color of cornflower blue and rectangles of darker paint where pictures had hung. It looked smaller, empty. Or maybe I'd just gotten bigger. Ma'am? One of the movers appeared in the doorway. That's the last of it from this room. You want us to start on the boxes in the garage? Please, I said. And thank you. He nodded and disappeared, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I did one final sweep of the room, checking closets and drawers I'd already checked 3 times. Then I picked up my purse, Richard's photograph, the last item remaining, and walked out without looking back. The hallway was lined with boxes, each one labeled in my careful handwriting. Kitchen, Kate. Books, Kate. Linens, Kate. A trail of my life, packed and ready to be transported to somewhere new. Ethan and Lydia stood in the living room like survivors of a disaster, surrounded by the furniture that would stay, the couch they'd insisted on buying last year, the coffee table Lydia had picked out, the television stand that had never quite fit the space. Everything they'd chosen. Everything that had slowly transformed my home into theirs. Now it was all they'd have. Lydia's face was blotchy from crying. She'd been crying on and off for days, though I suspected it was more about losing free housing than losing me. Ethan just looked hollow, like someone had scooped out his insides and left only a shell. I can't believe you're actually doing this, Lydia said as I came down the stairs. Her voice was thick, accusatory. You can't just throw away 40 years of family memories like they mean nothing. I paused on the bottom step, meeting her eyes. I'm not throwing them away. I'm taking the ones that matter. What's that supposed to mean? It means the memories worth keeping don't need this house to survive. They're in here. I touched my chest. And I'm taking them with me to a place where they'll be cherished instead of buried under resentment and ultimatums. 2 movers came through carrying my grandmother's hope chest between them. I watched them navigate the doorway carefully, professionally, and felt a pang, not of regret, but of finality. This was really happening. Ethan moved toward me, his movements jerky and uncertain. Mom, please. Where will you even go? You haven't told us anything. We don't know where you'll be living, how to reach you. Somewhere I'm wanted, I said simply. You're wanted here. His voice cracked. We want you here. No, Ethan. You wanted my house. You wanted my room. You wanted me to be small and quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of dignity you decided to leave me. I walked past him toward the door. That's not the same as wanting me. Outside, the moving truck rumbled to life. The sound felt like a starting gun. I turned back to face them one last time. Lydia had her arms crossed, tears streaming down her face but her expression hard. Ethan looked devastated, young, like a child who'd broken something precious and only now realized it couldn't be fixed. You're going to regret this, Lydia said, her voice venomous. When you're all alone in whatever little place you've run off to, you're going to realize what you gave up. Family. A grandchild. People who cared about you. I smiled, not unkindly, but with a certainty that clearly unsettled her. No, I said quietly. I regret waiting this long. I walked to where Ethan stood, pulled an envelope from my purse, and held it out to him. He took it automatically, confusion crossing his face. What is this? Read it later, I said. When you're ready to understand. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with words I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Ethan. I loved you enough to let you go. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about myself too. Don't come looking for me when you realize what you lost. By then, I'll have found what I'd forgotten I could have. Peace. Freedom. Joy. I hope someday you understand. Mom. I didn't wait to see if he'd open it. I walked out the front door, down the porch steps I'd swept 1,000 times, along the pathway Richard and I had laid stone by stone. The magnolia tree stood tall and green in the side yard, its branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. I stopped beside it, pressed my palm against the trunk one final time. Thank you, I whispered. For all the shade. All the beauty. All the memories. The leaves rustled, a goodbye, or maybe just wind. It didn't matter. Behind me, I heard the front door close. I didn't turn around. I walked to my car, where the movers had already loaded the last boxes. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, smiled at me. All set, ma'am. We'll meet you at the new address. Thank you, I said. I'll be right behind you. I climbed into my car, adjusted the rearview mirror, and caught one last glimpse of the house in the reflection. Blue shutters. White trim. The porch where Richard and I used to sit on summer evenings. A house full of memories. But I was full of memories too. And I was leaving. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and didn't look back again. The cottage looked even more beautiful than I remembered. Sunlight sparkled off the lake beyond the trees. The blue shutters gleamed freshly painted. The porch, my porch now, wrapped around the front like welcoming arms. The moving truck was already there, and the movers were efficient and cheerful, carrying boxes and furniture inside while I directed traffic and tried not to cry from sheer relief. By late afternoon, the truck was empty and my new home was full, chaotic and disorganized, but full of possibility. I tipped the movers generously, thanked them profusely, and closed the door behind them. Then I stood in the middle of my new living room and just breathed. The silence was different here. Not heavy or oppressive, but peaceful. Gentle. The kind of quiet that felt like a friend rather than a threat. I found the box labeled photos, immediate and carefully unwrapped Richard's framed photograph, the one from our anniversary at this very lake. I set it on the mantel above the small fireplace, adjusting it until it sat perfectly level. We made it, I whispered. Not the way we planned, but we made it. Then I walked through the cottage, opening curtains and windows, letting light and fresh air pour in. The lake breeze smelled like pine and water and new beginnings. I made myself a cup of tea, the kettle still worked, miracle of miracles, and carried it out to the porch. The deck boards creaked pleasantly under my feet as I settled into one of the 2 rocking chairs the previous owners had left behind. Through the trees, I could see the lake shimmering in the late afternoon sun, exactly the way Richard and I used to watch it shimmer all those summers ago. I was halfway through my tea when my phone rang. Emily's name flashed on the screen, along with a request for a video call. I answered, and my granddaughter's face filled the screen, 17 years old, bright-eyed, her father's features but her grandfather's gentle smile. Grandma. Oh my God, you moved. Show me everything. I laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising even me. Hold on, let me turn the camera around. I gave her a slow pan of the view, the porch, the garden that needed work, the glimpse of lake through the pines. Grandma, it's beautiful. Emily's voice was delighted. Is that your new house? Yes, darling, I said, turning the camera back to my face. And it's mine. All mine. I'm so proud of you, she said, and the sincerity in her voice made my throat tight. Dad called me. He's pretty upset. I imagine so. He said you cut him out of your will. Not entirely, I corrected gently. But I made some changes. You'll understand when you're older why I needed to. Emily nodded, suddenly looking much older than 17. I think I already understand, Grandma. Dad and Lydia, they weren't very nice to you. I noticed. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. You were respectful and kind, I said. That was enough. That was everything. Can I come visit? Maybe next weekend? I would love that. I'll make up the guest room. We can go down to the lake, maybe rent a kayak or you could teach me to fish. Emily interrupted excitedly. Like Grandpa taught Dad. The mention of Richard teaching Ethan to fish should have hurt. Maybe it would have, a few weeks ago. But now I just smiled. I'd love that. Your grandfather would too. We talked for a few more minutes, making plans and laughing about nothing important, and when we hung up, I felt fuller somehow. Less alone than I'd felt in years. Evening was settling over the lake now, turning everything golden and soft. I rocked gently in my chair, watching the light change, listening to the birds settling in for the night. Somewhere in the house behind me, a box needed unpacking. Probably several boxes. The bed needed making. I should figure out what to do about dinner. But for now, I just sat. And for the first time in 2 years, maybe longer, I felt completely, utterly at peace. You were right, Richard, I whispered to the lake, to the wind, to the memory of the man who'd loved me enough to make me promise I'd never lose myself. I just needed to remember who I was. The breeze picked up slightly, ruffling my hair and carrying the scent of pine and water and possibility. I closed my eyes and smiled. Somewhere behind me, my old life was being dismantled, redistributed, transformed into something I was no longer part of. But here, in this small blue cottage by the lake, surrounded by memories I'd chosen to keep and space I'd claimed as my own, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not lost. Not abandoned. Not small. Just Kate. Just me. Finally, blessedly, wonderfully free.